This is addressed to a man who goes by the YouTube handle The Smooth Terrorist, formerly known as Fake Sagan or Hard Case, whatever. This guy has been around running his mouth, playing the interweb tough guy in one form or another for quite some time. Anyway, after a long absence, he recently returned to make a few videos, including a Q&A. Some users seem really interested by the fact he's no longer an atheist and has found Jesus. I'm not really interested by that, but I did take issue with a couple of things he said in the Q&A, which I will now get into. Okay. Alright, so later on in this video he's talking about the Russia-Ukraine crisis, conflict, and he's putting a very pro-Russian spin on it. His praise for Putin in this video. How to describe it? Verbal fellatio? It's quite cringeworthy. Anyway, he claims that NGO is a misnomer. He asks and answers his own question. Non-governmental organisation, is there such a thing? The answer is no. Of course, in reality, there are NGOs. I'm a member of one, Ambassador at Large of Vote World Parliament. We're not supported by a single government on the planet. We're not being funded by corporate interests. We're not a CIA front group. And yes, Mr. Smooth Terrorist, you go on and have a little dig at Amnesty International and Reporters Without Borders. There are many human rights groups and legitimate NGOs functioning as best they can around the world, believe it or not. Washington doesn't control everything, sir. Yeah, sure, there are NGOs with a recognisable Western bias or liberal agenda. It doesn't then logically follow that all NGOs are government plants or spies or saboteurs taking orders from the White House or the Pentagon. No such thing as an NGO, come on. You come across like a propagandist where you're talking about Russia and the Ukraine, Mr. Smooth Terrorist, full of denunciations of the, quote, Western media. And you like to patronise your audience as well, apparently. You don't know anything about the Ukraine, but I, the Smooth Terrorist, am here to enlighten you. Yeah. It doesn't come across well, buddy. Maybe you could get a job at Russia Today. You'd make for a good Moscow mouthpiece, I'm thinking. On the basis of what I've seen, anyway. Then you get on to talking about Syria, and this claim again, which I've heard elsewhere. ISIS is a US-funded or created group set up to fuck with Russia. Yeah. The Mujahideen in Soviet-occupied Afghanistan is not the so-called caliphate of today. ISIS isn't the friend of the US. It's not friendly to US interests, or it's not the friend of anyone in the civilized world. And you go on to talk about how the US doesn't give a fuck about human rights, it's all about the oil. If it were about human rights, why aren't we in Africa, you ask? The United States, as it is today, is a criminal empire. I'm not pro-United States, in that I'm not pro-imperialism. But you say, why aren't the US in Africa? Because they don't have any oil. Well, Nigeria is the fourth largest oil producer, last time I checked. Egypt, Sudan, Republic of Congo, South Africa, Angola, Algeria, all oil producers. And Africa is the place to be for precious metals, gold, cobalt, platinum. The reality is, US military presence in Africa is well documented. I assume you know what United States Africa Command is and what they do. What about the raw mineral wealth of the Democratic Republic of Congo? We're talking trillions of dollars of untapped wealth. You don't think the US has clocked onto this? Of course they have. You've heard of Mobutu Sese Seko, yes? Master and ruler of Zaire back in the day, and a good friend of the US of A. Yeah. I don't know, Smooth Terrorist, you don't seem like a particularly smart cookie. That poison gas attack in Syria, you're adamant that that was the US. Come on, use your common sense, guys. Well, where's your evidence, sir? I'm not saying it's out of the question that US proxies would do something like that. The US has done far worse, but it's not out of the question that an authoritarian, dictatorial piece of shit like Assad would do something like that either. And he could use it to his own advantage. Yeah. You can't deny that Assad's heavy-handed, brutal response to the 2011 protests played a big part in the country's descent into civil war. Or maybe you can try and deny that. Yeah. I suspect you might. Anyway. Yeah. You talk some nonsense, so-called smooth terrorist. You really do.